First, thank Comexi for inviting me to do this. Let me apologize for being forced to do this in English. It should be in Spanish. I live in a major Spanish-speaking center of the world, being Southern California, but since I don't speak Spanish, I at least want to apologize to you for having to do it in English. Comexi and the Pacific Council, which I run, are partners in many things, and we have a Mexico initiative, so we're really lucky and blessed to have Comexi as a partner. To your question, Alejandra, President Obama back in the day, and Hillary Clinton and others talked about the United States pivoting towards Asia. And pivoting towards Asia basically is code language for the United States having a greater presence in Asia to counter China, whose regional ambitions are extraordinarily big and are of great worry, concern, and consequence to all of its neighbors, many of whom are American allies. So that frequently when I travel to Asia, what I hear from, people in, Vietnam, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, and Northeast Asia, Japan, Korea, and so forth, is where is the United States? What's the United States doing? How is the United States going to help us to sort of level things in terms of China, which is undermine Hong Kong, which sort of signals China's intentions. What's going on in Hong Kong is of great concern. Continues to be regarded as a menace to Taiwan, which again is of concern to all of our friends in the region. Three, is involved in the suppression of Muslims in China itself, in Xinjiang, the Uyghurs and others, which is a problem. It's antithetical to democracy. And finally, is engaged in building islands in the South China Sea and elsewhere, which are basically, military bases in which China, doesn't refer to as being military, but they are. So this is the context within which it occurred. The United States talked a lot about pivoting to China, to Asia, but really, didn't do it in a particularly significant way. So that when President Biden was elected, one of his major preoccupations is China and addressing what he and others regard as this Chinese threat. When I say threat, in terms of dealing with China, there are areas where we need to cooperate and collaborate. There are other areas in which they are our competitors. So I don't want to make it sound like we're on a war footing and we need to, go to war with China. The areas where we need to collaborate with China: global warming and public health issues. COVID had its origins in China, a country with a population of 1.3 billion people. So there are areas in which we need to cooperate and collaborate with the Chinese, particularly climate change and global pandemics. There are others in which the Chinese are rivals. And in my view, an ideal relationship with China includes elements of both, not one at the expense of the other. When President Trump would talk about the Chinese virus or the Wuhan flu, this frankly was not only racist, but it wasn't helpful. It wasn't helpful. And as you will see in the United States, there are hate crimes towards Asian Americans, which I believe were a consequence of this particular view. So the U.S. needs a broader relationship in that part of the world. And AUKUS, which is a kind of weird name, but Australia, UK, the United Kingdom, US, the United States, have developed a strategic collaboration. The Australians will be joining the small club of nations that have nuclear submarines. I think this is a great idea. I enthusiastically support it. I have real problems with the way in which it was executed. The problem is that the French, our allies, our NATO partners, had a deal with Australia that it was manufacturing and selling traditional diesel submarines to Australia in a deal that some say is worth as much as $66 billion. What the United States did, in my view, which was crude, heavy-handed, and disappointing, is we made a separate deal with the Australians and with the UK. That's where this, AUKUS comes from, to provide the Australians with nuclear subs, which is great, and I'm glad we did it. I believe that we made a blunder by not informing the French, collaborating with the French, because the French unhappiness has three elements to it. One is this was a deal worth a lot of money to France. $66 billion is a lot of money for anybody. Second of all, it was a strategic, understanding between the French and the Australians as part of a broader French policy towards, the Indo Pacific region. And third, what bothers them is when English-speaking countries get together and do deals, and exclude the French feel that we're kind of ganging up on them. We're sort of beating up on them. And this goes back to de Gaulle, when de Gaulle was in exile in the UK during World War II, who used to talk about the Anglo-Saxons and so forth. So the optics of this was not helpful. It turned out okay, sort of. The French recalled their ambassador from the United States. Apparently, President Biden and President Macron had a conversation, but we really handled it in a, as the French say, maladroite, a maladroit, clumsy way, and it was unfortunate and unnecessary. The other piece of it is something called the Quad. And the Quad is a relationship involving Australia, Japan, India, and the United States. But the Quad does not define itself to be an anti-China coalition. But there's an unmistakable quality to it that if you look at Japan, Northeast Asia, Australia, Southeast Asia, India, West Asia, and the United States, East Asia, east in terms of the US coast, as is the Mexican coast, facing the Pacific, it's clearly got a role to deal with China. The Quad does not have a military capability. It's not meant to be a military alliance. It's meant to be a piece. The final piece here is the Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative is an enormously large, ambitious plan by the Chinese to use its vast financial resources to develop a strategic advantage in its pursuit of playing a larger global role. So they will go to a place like Pakistan or Sri Lanka or Greece and say, look, we want to invest, the Belt and Road Project, we want to invest in partnerships, infrastructure building with you to help you and to help us so that we will be able to sort of live up to our global role. And Belt and Road is something that's meant, it's perfectly appropriate for China to develop, to use foreign aid as a means to develop a greater global influence. The United States does not have anything that can compete with Belt and Road. So we complain about Belt and Road, but we haven't, fielded anything that can compete with Belt and Road. And I remember Secretary of State Rex Tillerson during the Trump administration went to Africa and started lecturing all these African countries, you shouldn't take money from the Chinese for Belt and Road. But at the same time, we didn't offer the Africans anything. I was watching 2 days ago the confirmation hearings for new ambassadors, which you can watch. They live stream them from Capitol Hill. And someone who was a candidate for a position in Latin America was asked about the Chinese role in Latin America. and what will the United States do to counter that role? So we as a country don't necessarily like that role, but at the same time, we're not necessarily providing alternatives to it. Final point, Alejandra, and then we'll move on. Here's the Mexican piece. We in LA, really, what I always say is that California and Mexico are different, we're in different countries, but we share a region. We share a region. So the country part is legal, it's strategic. I absolutely understand it. You need passports and stuff to cross borders. But given that Los Angeles is closer to Mexico City than it is to Washington, there are many occasions in which our collaborating with Mexico, with whom we share a region, is in our interest and it's in Mexico's interest. So for example, we worked with your consulate here to promote what we're calling vaccine diplomacy, because we think vaccines should be available to people on both sides of the border. And if we, export vaccine to Mexico or help Mexico with vaccine or help Mexico vaccinate people, it's in our interest. Walls do not prevent people from getting sick. So we should be collaborating with you on, on public health issues. Here's the one that we keep thinking about. We have been thinking about developing a dialogue or a trialogue between Mexico, Southern California, and China on economic interactions amongst our three countries and our three regions. We haven't, begun to do this yet, but we think as Southern Californians, making Mexico part of the conversation certainly helps us. Certainly as Californians, we believe it would help you. And what we all believe, most of us believe, is, we need to stand up to China where China is misbehaving. But we also need to find ways to collaborate with China. And here I disagree a little bit with the Biden administration, because the Biden administration has been trying to get other states to join the United States in a sort of coordinated alliance focused at blunting China's global ambitions. And none of our allies are interested. They won't do it. The Europeans, the EU doesn't want to do it. NATO is a different issue, and NATO certainly is concerned with China. Even the Israelis, with whom we're very, very close, Israel has substantial commercial and other relationships with China, which it doesn't want to put at risk in order to support a U.S. policy, which tends to, reflect the U.S.'s view of the world. So we believe that, involving Mexico and the Chinese and Southern California in a conversation about commercial and trade issues could be really, really interesting, and that leads to other things. In this world, you need this. I'm sure your viewers will know this idiom. You need sticks and you need carrots. Sticks are meant to sort of goad your rivals into doing things. Carrots, I don't know it should be sticks and chocolate or something, but carrots are meant to be things that are appealing. And so you need to have a mixture of both. And in a sense, that's what diplomacy and that's what relations amongst countries are. That, if you look at Mexico, any country's relations with another country, there are going to be issues that you agree on, issues that there are sort of under contention, and then issues you just disagree with one another. So that what I like about what's going on in Asia now, and I liked about AUKUS, is there are carrots and there are sticks. And to make your formulation even more complicated, country X, which may be opposed to AUKUS publicly and said it's going to unleash an arms race, quietly may think, this is great. This is great. The United States and Australia are stepping up. We're going to be under their umbrella. They're going to, help to promote our security. But we don't want the Chinese to know we're as happy about this as we are, because we don't want to put, our relationship with China at risk. And Australia actually has been the brunt of some really, really aggressive negative policies by China. So, international relations is often described as playing chess, multiple games of chess on multiple chessboards simultaneously. So what you just said, as complicated as it is, and as my original comments were complicated, that's the reality. That's the reality. And that's kind of what you want. So that what we want to say to the Chinese, look, if you want to work with us, if you want to collaborate with us, we're all in. We're eager to do it. On the other hand, if you're going to challenge us or disagree with us or, do things that we disagree with, we are, in a position to speak up for ourselves, to protect our friends and allies, and so forth. So you want this mixed bag of very different instruments. And I can't think of any country in Southeast Asia that would be really opposed to AUKUS. Publicly they might be. Privately, they are more worried about the Chinese than they are about us. And what the Chinese do, and it's very smart, is they use this sort of commercial diplomacy. They use their buying power, as they can and should, to promote their national and regional interests, which is, we all do that. We certainly do. I don't need to tell Mexico about how the United States does this, because we do, all countries do that. So, there's no simple response to what you just said. You said it quite accurately. It's a complicated world, and it just got more complicated. The thing we've not mentioned is Afghanistan, which is, again, to use this French word maladroit, the United States, in my view, again, and I'm a very patriotic person, we did not handle Afghanistan in a particularly, I think, thoughtful, effective way. I was just, now the world is back, I was just in London 2 weeks ago, and I was meeting with, government officials. They were uniformly very unhappy with us. They said the United States did not give them a heads up of what we were going to do in Afghanistan. The British were caught by surprise, and they were very, very unhappy about it. This will be repaired. But it's interesting that the Biden administration, which values alliances and relations and partnerships, which they're sincere about, has not been very good at actually doing it. And I like the policies. I think the United States should have left Afghanistan. I would have done it differently. I support the policy. I just would do it in a different way. And then the way in which it would be communicated. So, that's the issue. So the Taiwanese are certainly mindful of what happened in Afghanistan, and that we, and they're mindful of what's going on in Hong Kong, that we're saying the right things about Hong Kong, but there's not a lot we can do about it, or that we're willing to do about it. So you can be sure this has gotten the attention of the Taiwanese. China is playing the long game with Taiwan. I think they eventually believe that Taiwan is sort of organically gonna evolve into being, part of greater China. And, who's to say they're wrong? Who's to say they're wrong? So. I can't answer that question. I mean, that's why it's such a good question, and it's a hard question to answer. Again, I'm a very patriotic person. I study stuff, and in my world, everything is open for analysis. So if I were an ally or a friend of the United States, I would not, if I was playing poker, I wouldn't push all my chips in and bet on the United States. I really wouldn't. Trump had a very different view of America's global role. This America First notion, suggests that our interests are above everybody else's. And this is where it gets messy, because in terms of, there's certain areas where Mexico and California, our interests are identical. We cannot do America first without thinking about Mexico's piece of that, because we share a region. So that's why I have problems with America first. I think it's short-sighted and wrong. But, if I were, an ally of the United States, Trump or people that think like him could be back. And even Biden, who talks about alliances and respect and friendship, and I think he believes it. He's sincere. He kind of dropped the ball a couple of times. He messed up with Afghanistan. He messed up with AUKUS. So you've asked a really, really hard question. I mean, it's funny, when I was in the UK 2 weeks ago, I got the same question you asked me from my British friends who were government officials. And they basically said, can we count on the United States? And I could not, as an analyst, as an analyst, I couldn't say absolutely, unqualified. You can trust us. Because, Afghanistan has showed me that, we can't. AUKUS, if I were the French, I mean, they say this has gone away. Macron had a conversation with Biden. I don't know. And so I think we're living in a very different world, and we don't know what our political situation is going to be. I mean, we don't know, will Biden run for a second term? Will he be elected? Will Kamala Harris run? Will she be elected? Will Trump come back and run for election? Will, some other Republican, who shares his worldview? We're living in a very different world. And, Biden, thinks globally, and I think he genuinely believes it. Trump, everything is local. Everything is local. It's what do the people that vote in American elections think about things. The wall. I mean, what's going on the border now with all of these, forget Central America, with all of the Haitians, that are trying to make their way in the United States. There was film on the news 2 days ago, which I'm sure you've seen, of guys on horses running down these black people, these Haitians who are black, and chasing them into this river. You cannot imagine how powerful that imagery is in a country where we had, where black people were enslaved, and black people are still not fully, empowered. The imagery, Kamala Harris criticized this. Nancy Pelosi criticized this. So, you've asked a great question. We can't answer it, but we need to keep asking that question. The Mexican piece of it, and again, I'm not an expert on Mexico, but the one game, not game changer, the one we finally confirmed our ambassador to Mexico. Ambassador Salazar is in Mexico City as we speak. I saw him wearing this cowboy hat on TV, doing whatever new ambassadors do. And it's, we need to think about, and this is not my area, it's your area and others, about, Mexican-US relations. How does Mexico look at the United States? Are we indispensable? Are we reliable? Can we be counted on? Can we predict? And we have differences, obviously, between the US and Mexico. But the question you've asked is on the lips of everybody in every country in the world. And it's important, and we don't know. So. No, absolutely. If I were the head of state of any country in the Western Hemisphere, with the exception of the United States and Canada, if I was the president of Mexico or Argentina or, any country in this hemisphere, I would be well aware of China's interest in this hemisphere. And I would try, and again, this is Jerry Green analyst, not Jerry Green American patriot. I would think, is there a way in which I can derive some benefit from my country, from China's, interest in this hemisphere, in a way that will benefit my country, but won't put my country at risk, that won't put my country at risk. And look, as an American patriot, I'd like everybody to line up with us. I want everybody to agree with us. And, as a political scientist and an analyst and somebody who, in a rather dispassionate way studies these things, for, a country with the might of China to be interested in my country, I'm not mentioning names, but in this hemisphere, there may be an opportunity for us as a country to take advantage of it. Plus, it might make it a little more difficult for Washington to take us for granted. So I'd certainly, this is not something that, policymakers in Washington might be happy to hear me say, but it's kind of, it's common sense. It's common sense. That's, by the way, the notion of a trialogue between Mexico, California, and China is interesting to me because, look, I want, us in Mexico to be of one mind on as many things as possible. And, we share a fate, we share a destiny, we share a region. So, I'd like to be part of a conversation with the Chinese. But having said that, China, look, in the history of US foreign policy, the Western Hemisphere is always kind of forgotten. It's kind of, the stepchild. That's an ugly expression because I have stepson, but, that's, it's another American idiom. And the Western Hemisphere tends to be taken for granted. And I, if I were the head of state of any country in this hemisphere, I would not want that to be the case. So if you can get Washington's attention and get Washington to pay more attention and to direct more resources, and it's natural. The risk, of course, is when you're playing with the Chinese. They play for keeps, and you don't want to put your country at risk by engaging in a way with, engaging with China in a way that, puts the country at risk. But, there are really smart people in every most foreign ministries in this hemisphere. Certain countries I'm not so sure, but there's certainly smart people in your ministry. I'm not talking about Mexico. So, I don't want to say it's a dangerous game, but it's a game not without risk. But that's, that's the nature of this business.